I'd like to start with an image of an eagle. This eagle is injured and alone. Unable to fly, it cries out. And when it does, 4 eagles descend from each of the 4 directions. Surrounded by 4 strong eagles, the injured eagle is no longer alone. We'll come back to this story, but first, I'd like to introduce a Cree word that has changed the way I think about self-love. Sakihiwaywin. Sakihiwaywin roughly translates in English as love with responsibility. Instead of simply a feeling, Sakihiwaywin is a practice. And when we practice Sakihiwaywin, what I find is that we can alchemize feelings of isolation and grief into clarity and connection. So, what do you picture when you hear the words self-love? That could be a hard question to answer these days. Between everything we've got going on top of trying to manage our screen time and trying to make sense of what's happening in the world, we often end up quieting parts of ourselves that are guided by curiosity and connection. These parts of ourselves are what I consider our inner child. And my inner child has always been interested in telling stories. In Indigenous storytelling, it matters deeply where the storyteller comes from. Holding stories is a responsibility. And so, as I've been learning Cree and growing as a filmmaker, I had to ask myself, how could I be a storyteller if I'm not responsible for my own truth? Johnson Adidumtek, April Johnson and Sigosan, Muscadet, Saskatchewan, Ochinia. My name is April Johnson, and I'm Cree and Métis on my mother's side and of European settler descent on my father's side. I'm from Muscadet, Saskatchewan in Treaty 6 territory. The concept of Sakihiwaywin can expose parts of ourselves that we've learned to avoid. I've come to this realization through distance, through grief, and through choosing parts of myself that felt more outwardly acceptable over what mattered more to my inner child. Let me take you back. It's winter 2012, and I'm living in Russia. And on this particular morning, I wake up in tears. I check the news from back home in Canada, and I see the same news that's been unfolding for days. My screen is flooded with images of round dances and shopping malls and drums echoing throughout public spaces. It's the Idle No More movement, and it's spreading across Canada. The Idle No More movement was a groundbreaking political movement, an assertion of Indigenous rights, and it ignited something in me. From the other side of the world, I felt pride, but also a heavy weight in my stomach, because I wanted to be sharing stories that mattered, stories that could ignite new ideas and maybe even spread around the world. Instead, I felt alone, perhaps like that injured eagle did before the others surrounded it. In that moment, I realized that you could have a great life, but still be avoiding the one that's meant for you. And so I returned to Canada to start building a life that my inner child was asking of me, and to begin the practice of Sakihiwaywin. Fast forward to 2020, and the world and I are in a very different place. I have a great job at a film and television production company, and on paper, everything looks great. Until July of 2020, when my brother dies of a fentanyl overdose. When I get the call, it's early morning, and once again, I'm laying on my bed alone on a tear-soaked pillow. But these tears are heavier. They carry the knowing that time is not promised to anyone. And holding that grief while social distancing was hard, much harder than the geographical distance in Russia. But the isolation also brought clarity. During lockdown, I acknowledged my fear of leaving stability, fear of telling stories that deeply mattered to me, and this fear was holding back Sakihiwaywin. I felt a responsibility to my brother, to myself, to the stories I had yet to tell, to alchemize my grief into connection that could help not only myself, but others as well, to be like one of the strong eagles. And so I changed direction, and by 2025, I produced my first television series, a kids series rooted in Cree language and culture. Creating it felt like honoring my inner child. And as I began the work, I began collaborating with other like-minded folks who became a community and helped me heal. Sakihiwaywin was no longer an idea. It was a practice. Around this time, a story was shared with me by a mentor of mine. a Cree elder named Cookum Dorothy Visser. I call Dorothy Cookum because Cookum is the Cree word for grandmother. While out on a walk, Cookum Dorothy encounters an injured eagle on the ground. Its wing is hurt and it's unable to fly. The eagle cries out. As it cries out, 4 eagles swoop down from each of the 4 directions and they circle the injured eagle. They chirp and whistle together in unison, almost like they're singing and dancing. As they sing and dance, the injured eagle gathers its strength, stands, and makes its way to a safer place to rest. Those eagles reminded Cookum Dorothy that even in our weakest moments, we're not meant to heal alone. That is Sakihiwaywin, a world without distance from others. When I think of Cookum's story, it feels like it's circling me, kind of like the eagles in a way. Her story reminded me that I wasn't meant to carry this work alone and why I began in the first place. And still, after learning the teaching of Sakihiwaywin, another distance appeared, but this time within myself. And in 2025, despite outward success, I felt very far from myself, very far from my inner child. My routine felt like a daily grind, and Sakihiwaywin felt more like an idea instead of a daily practice. Until one morning, I woke up again to a tear-soaked pillow. It was a lesson that achieving your goals without listening to yourself comes at a cost. And those tears led to answers. After years of ignoring my mental health, I was diagnosed with PTSD. I finally had the language and a framework for understanding the struggles that I'd carried quietly for years. And that clarity asked something of me. It asked me to own my truth. Because owning my truth is my own Indigenous story. Owning my truth is Sakihiwaywin. It's my responsibility to myself and others to alchemize my self-discovery into self-care. I'm sharing my brother's death, my fears, and my mental health struggles because these are not isolated experiences. They're shaped by colonial systems that have disrupted culture, language, and community for generations. The Truth and Reconciliation calls to action recognize that access to culture and language is part of healing mental, emotional, and spiritual harms caused by colonization and the legacy of residential schools. The Commission also calls on media to reflect Indigenous languages, cultures, and perspectives, both on screen and in leadership. Many Indigenous nation stories have been stolen, silenced, or minimized. And these are stories that could heal, connect, and restore responsibility. This work matters. This work is Sakihiwaywin. For the eagles, Sakihiwaywin looked like circling one another until one could stand again. For me, it looks like caring for my mental health, honoring my inner child, choosing connection over distance, and creating stories that center Indigenous perspectives. Sakihiwaywin isn't a single breakthrough moment or waiting for pain to force change. It's a daily practice of courageous care. It's my hope that Sakihiwaywin will gently remind you that when we care for ourselves, we strengthen our capacity to care for others, and that we can alchemize our fear into purpose. So, if you're having challenges like mine, here's what I suggest. Don't wait for a crisis to occur before practicing self-care. Allow yourself to be circled by others if you need it. Distance is the opposite of Sakihiwaywin. And ask yourself, how might you honor that inner child within you? And what else might you need? Maybe you need to honor your mental health. Maybe consider your own self-talk. But always be mindful of the language you choose when you do so. Thank you.